Welcome to the InnoGuide podcast, where we share the works of authors and mentors to guide innovation. I'm your host, Bob Boudelier. This podcast, my website, my newsletter, and my community are focused on helping you discover the secrets of innovation in the age of AI. Since I don't rely on paid ads, I want to thank our customers who bring me onto their programs for 10 to 12 weeks as a technical product accelerator to work alongside their teams to help them develop medical products smarter and faster without adding risk, while bringing human-centered AI skills into their organizations. You can learn more at www.innoguide.net. In this episode, number 84, we'll be sharing Runnin' Down a Dream, How to Thrive in a Career You Actually Love, by Bill Gurley. Without further ado, please enjoy this episode. Let's get started. Introduction. Step off the conveyor belt. Let me start with a simple question. Have you ever met someone who just radiates that they're exactly where they're meant to be? Not just successful, not just competent, but lit up. The chef who can't stop talking about a secret recipe, the realtor who thrives on the chase, the stylist who beams when a client sees themselves in the mirror, the data scientist who gets genuinely excited about raw numbers. We call those people lucky. We say they had connections, talent, a big break. And most of us quietly decide, that probably isn't in the cards for me. So we make a trade. Work becomes the paycheck. Fulfillment gets pushed to nights and weekends, vacations, retirement. But here's the myth. That's the only realistic path. You're going to spend roughly 80,000 hours working in your lifetime, 1/3 of your life. Are you really comfortable spending that time just passing through? For most of human history, people didn't have a choice. Your job was your bloodline. Archer, baker, smith. The son of a steelworker became a steelworker. Daughters had even fewer options. Then college became the promised pathway. And suddenly at 17, you're expected to pick one of 4,000 schools, choose a major, and decide your entire professional destiny. Kindergarten through high school, that's a conveyor belt. Senior year, you're dumped onto an 8-lane freeway with exits every quarter mile. Add in parents, teachers, guidance counselors, the career conveyor belt industrial complex, nudging you toward doctors, lawyers, engineers, safe choices, high income, prestige. But where's the time to explore, to wonder? And now the safe careers aren't even safe. Technology, especially AI, is reshaping law, medicine, computer science. The ground is moving beneath our feet. So what can you actually control? This question has fascinated me for decades. As a teenager in the early 80s, I fell in love with computers, Atari Pong, Mattel and television. Then a Commodore VIC-20 hooked up to my TV. No permanent memory, hit the off switch and everything vanished. I learned programming by typing in code from magazines and debugging my own mistakes. It felt magical. I majored in computer science at the University of Florida and landed at Compaq in Houston, one of the hottest tech companies at the time. Great money, great culture. Heavy, luggable computer with a green screen. I had one. And after 2 years, I quit. Why? Because Project 3 felt like Project 2, which felt like Project 1. I could see the boredom coming. So I enrolled in the MBA program at the University of Texas in Austin, this time with intention. I started reading on my bus commute Peter Lynch, Carl Sewell, Michael Lewis, Lee Iacocca, Chuck Yeager, even The Art of the Deal when it was topping bestseller lists. I discovered a bigger world, Wall Street, New York, Silicon Valley. Eventually, I found my calling in venture capital, where I could combine technology, investing, and competition. I love making bets about the future and seeing them play out. Over time, I noticed patterns among people who land in their dream jobs. And then I saw something that stunned me. In an early survey I ran, over 70% of people said that if they could start over, they would choose a different career. 7 out of 10. Later, working with Wharton, we surveyed 10,000 Americans. Nearly 6 in 10 would do things differently. 40% would choose entirely different occupations. Gallup reports showed only 23% of employees worldwide are thriving at work. That's a crisis. Work satisfaction correlates strongly with life satisfaction, and yet most people are just filling a seat and watching the clock. Here's what struck me. The people who were hopeful about their work were 66% more likely to say they were in a dream job. Those who had been thoughtful and reflective early on were far more likely to feel fulfilled. This isn't about luck alone, though. It's about intention. We live in the most opportunity-rich moment in history. You can access world-class knowledge on YouTube, DM almost anyone, build communities around any niche interest. Technology, even AI, makes learning faster and cheaper than ever. But thriving isn't free. If you want a long, satisfying career, it's a grind. It requires effort, reflection, and courage to step off the conveyor belt. My partner, Kevin Harvey, has a phrase I love. Life is a use it or lose it proposition. If you've got one shot at 80,000 hours, why not aim them at something that actually lights you up? That's what this book is about. A playbook, a roadmap, 6 principles I've observed over decades of watching people succeed. You don't control everything, but you control more than you think. And it might be time to step off that belt. Profile 1. The never-ending quest for the perfect restaurant. Let me tell you about Danny Meyer, because his story captures something most of us miss. The dream job isn't found by accident. It's built one intentional step at a time. Danny still remembers what he ate the night his life pivoted. It was a Friday in 1983 at Elio's in Manhattan. Green and white pasta with cream sauce and Parmesan, plus pollo al matone, chicken under a brick. He was there with his Aunt Virginia, his Uncle Richard, and his grandmother Rosetta Harris. Everyone was enjoying Chianti Classico. Danny wasn't drinking. He had to wake up at 5 a.m. to take the LSAT, which is the law SAT, and he was dreading it. Here's the irony. On paper, Danny was crushing it. He'd moved to New York in 1980 to sell electronic anti-shoplifting tags at Checkpoint Systems. In 3 years, he became the top salesperson, earning $125K a year, nearly $500,000 today. And he invested heavily in company stock, which quintupled. His bosses sent him around the country to train sales teams and even asked if he'd open an office in London. So Danny spent 2 weeks alone in London, pre-internet, with a Galton Mio guide, eating out every night, studying the restaurant scene like it was a discipline. He even went solo to a Boy George concert. Then he came home and shocked his bosses. He quit. Not because he hated the job, but because he could see the future boredom coming. Project 3 already felt like Project 2. Before that, Danny's reasonable path looked like politics or journalism. He majored in political science at Trinity College, worked at a public TV station in Chicago, and even joined John Anderson's long-shot 1980 presidential campaign. When that fizzled, he returned to New York, explored journalism schools, and landed on law school as the practical option. More doors, more flexibility. But deep down, he knew he didn't want to be a lawyer. He didn't want a life built on conflict. He liked making people happy, bringing people together. That's why at Elio's, he looked miserable. His Uncle Richard noticed. Richard, an artist, early Sesame Street writer and oral historian, asked him bluntly what was wrong. Danny confessed he couldn't believe he was taking the LSAT because he didn't even want to be a lawyer. And Richard hit him with a question Danny never forgot. Do you have any idea how long you're going to be dead? What? Then the real point. You'll be dead a lot longer than you'll be alive. So why would you do something you have no passion for? Danny didn't know what else to do. Richard did. Since childhood, Danny had been obsessed over food and restaurants, menus, design, the details most people overlook. He scheduled sales calls around lunches. He read sidewalk menus for fun. But it never occurred to him that that fascination could be a career. So Richard said it plainly. Why don't you open a restaurant? Danny still took the LSAT that next morning. He'd paid for it, but he was relaxed. His mind was already moving forward. He never applied to law school. That Monday, he enrolled in Restaurant Management 101 at the New York Restaurant School. He pulled in a friend from U.S. Trust as the money guy, and Danny would be the food guy. Through that connection, Danny landed a job at Pesca, a seafood restaurant, starting as an assistant lunch manager. Reservations, specials, hosting, and learning the rhythm of a dining room. And Danny fell in love with the whole ecosystem, the fast-paced intensity, the choreography of the staff, the way small details add up to a great experience. He went from $125,000 a year to $250 a week and felt more alive. He studied relentlessly, wine courses at l'Académie de Vin, research on the chefs across the country. He built knowledge, earned trust, suggested specials, and watched some get accepted. He also met Audrey, a magnetic waitress and actor who would become his wife. Knowing he still had much to learn, Danny arranged stages, short, intense culinary apprenticeships, and spent months in Italy and France. In Rome, he learned from a restaurant family where the menu never changed. He haunted open-air markets, took notes on taste and design, and most importantly, wrote down how restaurants made him feel. He lived cheaply, spend your money on your belly, not your pillow. Milan was a low point. He paid $500 a week to learn from a woman described as the Julia Child of Italy and felt conned when she barely showed up. Lonely, rainy, homesick, missing Audrey, this was the part where many people retreat back to the safe path. But Danny didn't. He pushed on to Bordeaux, where a restaurant had just lost a Michelin star and the kitchen was shaken up, creating openings that let him do the real work. He cooked staff family meal, made his grandmother's St. Louis, visited vineyards on Sundays, and saw guests applaud a meal like it was theater. By the time he returned to New York, he wasn't daydreaming, he was drafting. He chose New York over Chicago, partly because Audrey made it clear she wouldn't move, and then faced a key insight. He loved kitchens, but he was best in the dining room, relationships, the front door, the feel of the room. So he hired a chef, running tryouts with a simple set of ingredients to see who had the best instincts. Then came the hunt for the right space, over 100 locations across neighborhoods. He felt pulled to Union Square with its farmers market and emerging energy. He found a vegetarian place called Brownie's with a vitamin shop attached, not for sale, until the owner admitted he was ready to retire. One night sitting in a tapas bar, Danny sketched on a flimsy napkin a layout idea. Knock down the wall, create a long bar, and make the space feel like a party with pockets of intimacy. He took the sketch to his former boss at Pesca, who validated the concept. Danny made the deal. The numbers were huge. $750K to take over the lease plus $500K in improvements. Danny poured in his savings and borrowed from family. Aubrey helped to train staff. Opening night in October 1985 was emotional. Family, friends, a jazz trio, recipes pulled from his travels and childhood, every detail filtered through his taste. The Union Square Cafe became a New York institution, repeatedly named best by Zagat. Danny built a hospitality empire after that, including Shake Shack, which began as a park kiosk and grew into a global brand. But the secret ingredient wasn't luck. It was intentionality. The relentless, methodical pursuit of getting better, still visible decades later when Danny takes his chefs to eat 8 versions of the same dish just to debate the nuances and come home with a shared standard. I love this, he said. It keeps me happy. Well, that's the point. Principle 1. Chase your curiosity. We tell young people to follow your passion, and we say it like it's a map. But sometimes it's a trap. Jerry Seinfeld made this point in a 2024 commencement speech. He told graduates he couldn't imagine how sick they were of hearing "follow your passion." And then he said, "The hell with passion." Instead, he offered a better word: fascination. Fascination is steadier, less theatrical, and more useful. Because fascination pulls you into details. It creates an endless desire to learn more. That's what curiosity really is, a force that keeps you coming back. Follow your fascination. If you love what you do, you will work harder than anyone else and it won't feel like work. You'll practice because you want to, not because you have to. That's why the best performers are so hard to beat. Magnus Carlsen, one of the greatest chess players alive, has explained that he did the same thing other kids did, reading books, playing games. But he did them for fun. The others practiced. He lived and breathed it. Great athletes say the same thing in different language. They don't just love game day, they love practice. And that gives you a real test for whether you found your direction. Do you enjoy the preparation? Angela Duckworth, who made the book Grit famous, breaks grit into passion and perseverance. And here's the surprise. She now believes passion is the harder part. People can learn to grind, but finding the thing worth grinding for, an obsessive interest, is rare. And if you don't have it yet, you're normal. Research suggests only a minority of young people have a strong sense of purpose early on. Most of us need trial and error. So wander with a purpose. Try structured exercises if you're stuck. List loves and strengths and look for the overlap. Write about what work is for and what a good life means, and then look for alignment. Draft multiple 5-year Odyssey plans to force yourself to imagine different futures and notice how each one makes you feel. Then immerse. Read books that reveal the real experience of a field, biographies, industry histories, because they can do something powerful. They give you permission. Seinfeld read about comedians. Danny learned that serious people build serious lives in food. That kind of permission can be life-changing. And don't underestimate side hustles. One of the smartest strategies I've seen is using small outside projects to maximize your surface area for luck. That's how careers get discovered, not just chosen. Finally, follow Duckworth's simple metaphor. Be like a paramecium. Move toward warmth and nutrients. If a place, a project, or a group of people makes you feel more alive and more capable, lean in. If it drains you year after year, change direction. And remember, persistence without fascination is drudgery. The goal isn't to find something that merely looks impressive. The goal is to find something you could practice indefinitely, because you'd do it anyway, even if nobody asked. Profile 2. Reading every script in Hollywood. Laurie Bartlett's story starts in a dark, slightly worn-down movie theater in Monrovia, California. By the early 1970s, the old Lyric Theater, renamed the Crest, was no longer glamorous. Tickets were only 25 cents. The seats were dusty, but to Laurie it was magic. She went every week, sometimes 2 or 3 times. Once the lights went down, the outside world disappeared. When she wasn't at the theater, she was reading or watching TV, or lost in stories. She wasn't just entertained by them, she was transported by them. Her father, Bob Bartlett, was the first black member and later mayor of the Monrovia City Council. He advertised his first campaign on that very theater's marquee. He revitalized public transit, he redeveloped downtown, and he made deals and built consensus. Laurie admired the way he listened, negotiated, and brought people together. So when she went to Occidental College, she majored in diplomacy and world affairs, imagining a future in the Foreign Service. It made sense. She loved the art of connection. But during her freshman year, something shifted. She realized she didn't want to work for the U.S. government. She was untethered again, unsure of which direction to take. Then she revisited an old love, storytelling. Monrovia felt worlds away from Hollywood, even though it was only 25 miles from the studios. Laurie didn't want to act, she didn't want to write or direct, but she began to wonder about the business side of entertainment. So she secured an internship at Kaleidoscope Films, a company that created trailers and marketing campaigns for movies. Instant fit. Bingo. I thought, oh yeah, I like entertainment, she told me. One early day at the office, Barbra Streisand walked in. This was the late 90s, Streisand, a global icon. Laurie felt the buzz of proximity to greatness. Then someone gave her advice that changed her trajectory. If you want to understand entertainment, work at an agency. You'll see everything. She'd never heard of an agent before, but the idea fascinated her. Agents connected talent. They curated careers. They sat at the intersection of creativity and business. It felt like diplomacy in service of storytelling. So she applied to the William Morris agency for an entry-level assistant job and got it. She worked under Joan Hyler, a powerful agent whose clients included Madonna, Andy Warhol, and Meryl Streep. Hyler was a generous mentor. She pushed Laurie forward. Go do it, she'd say. In meetings and on phone calls, Laurie observed how agents shaped careers, putting the right creative forces in the same room, aligning interests and guiding long arcs. And she realized this is it. But just as she was becoming clear about her path, an older executive at William Morris told her she'd never be promoted there. She didn't collapse, though. She didn't rage. I didn't cry for a week, she said, but I cried for an hour. That moment sharpened her resolve. She moved to the Gersh Agency, a smaller, more personal shop run by Bob and David Gersh. Bob offered her a chance, started as his assistant, and in 6 months they'd reevaluate her path to becoming an agent. At Gersh, she had access. She was in the rooms. She was asked what she was reading. So she built a differentiator. She would read every script she could. Not just the obvious ones, the overlooked ones. The treatments others skipped. She didn't skim. She imagined the finished film. Who might star in it? Who might direct it? What it could become. For many people, that sounds exhausting. But for Laurie, it was joy. She studied Bob Gersh's negotiations. He would calmly state a number, what his client was worth, and stop talking. No over-explaining, no hedging. You can say the most outrageous thing, Laurie told me, but if you say it confidently and low-key, it throws people off. Within a year, she became a full-fledged agent. She never stopped reading. At Sundance, she'd sit in dark theaters all day, 5 or 6 films in a row. Not because she had to, but because she loved it. Any film could hold a future client, a future collaborator, the missing piece of a project not yet imagined. In 1996, she saw a low-budget British film called Stella Does Tricks and was blown away by the then-unknown actress named Kelly MacDonald. It took 10 years, but eventually she signed MacDonald, just as No Country for Old Men launched her to global recognition. Around 2013, she read a script circulating quietly in Hollywood, a border thriller called Cesario, written by an unknown television actor named Taylor Sheridan. She loved it, called him, told him it was one of the best scripts she'd read in a decade. She didn't end up representing him, but she built a relationship. Because she understood something essential. This is a relationship business. People remember who recognize their talent. She read everything: Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Deadline. She read narrative journalism in The New Yorker and The Atlantic because intellectual property drives Hollywood. She read gossip columns. She stockpiled information. Information is power, she says. You never know where something interesting is going to come from. One night at the party, she saw Bob Dylan sitting alone. The Bob Dylan. She recently read a script he'd optioned. She knew it was set in a carnival. She had a friend, director Penelope Spiris, who grew up in a carnival family. So she walked over and said, "I've read the script. I feel the vision." Dylan invited her to sit, and they talked for the rest of the night. The movie was never made. Most aren't. The lesson stuck. Read everything. Over time, Laurie became the first African-American board member of a major talent agency and the first African-American head of a talent department. Her clients included Regina King, Michael Keaton, and Ruth Negga. In 2024, she received the Culture Creators Icon Award for advancing diversity and inclusion in Hollywood. In her acceptance speech, she offered advice that transcends industries. She said this: stay ready, be consistent, celebrate wins, analyze losses, send a note, find your people. And she ended with the line that reveals her core. The idea that I have contributed in any way to our beautiful, astonishing, powerful culture gives me such great joy. That's fascination turned into craft. Principle 2. Hone your craft. If Profile 1 was about chasing curiosity, Profile 2 is about what you do once you find it. You hone it. Think about Picasso. When you walk through the Picasso Museum in Barcelona, the early works shock you. As a teenager, he painted classical portraits with extraordinary precision. First Communion won an art prize when he was 15. Before Picasso could break the rules, he mastered them. That pattern repeats everywhere. Danny Meyer studied every detail of restaurants and still does. Laurie Bartlett reads every script. Jerry Seinfeld studied comedians. Quentin Tarantino worked at a video store devouring films. Stephen King reads constantly and writes 2,000 words a day, even in his 70s. Rick Rubin says creativity starts with curiosity and openness. There's no shortcut here. To be great, you must love learning your field deeply, and it must feel like play. I'm going to say that again. To be great, you must love learning your field deeply, and it must feel like play. There are 4 kinds of learning that matter. First, learn the history. Study the pioneers, know the canonical works. Learn the language of your industry. Understand the big disruptions and the big mistakes. This builds credibility and tests your interest. If the history bores you, that's the data. Second, continuous learning. Not just what your company feeds you, external learning. Warren Buffett still reads investment newsletters. J.D. Rockefeller studied competitors. Satya Nadella transformed Microsoft's culture from know-it-all to learn-it-all. Kobe Bryant, after 4 championships, flew to Houston to spend 2 hours perfecting footwork with Hakeem Olajuwon, and that's what continuous learning looks like. Third, unique knowledge. Find what others overlook. Laurie identified overlooked talent. Danny spotted emerging neighborhoods. A 20-year-old British student became a go-to expert on obscure U.S. parliamentary procedure simply because he loved reading 1,000-page rulebooks. You might not be the smartest in your field, but you can become the most knowledgeable. And fourth, far analogies. Learning outside your field. Darwin read geology books before shaping evolutionary theory. Nobel laureates are far more likely to engage in arts outside their discipline. Steve Jobs studied calligraphy. Cross-pollination sparks breakthroughs. When you widen your intellectual aperture, you create the conditions for originality. And today, you have no excuse. You have books, podcasts, documentaries, forums, and now AI, an inexhaustible companion ready to take you down any rabbit hole instantly. Charlie Munger said he constantly sees people rise who aren't the smartest, but they're learning machines. They go to bed a little wiser than when they woke up. That's available to anyone. Comes back to this. If you really want to succeed, you have to learn. And if you truly love what you're learning, the effort won't feel like effort. Curiosity gets you in the door, but craft keeps you there. Profile 3. The Ballad of Robert Zimmerman. Let me take you to Hibbing, Minnesota. Modest blue two-story house, long brutal winters, a mining town on the Iron Range where blue-collar life defined the rhythm of everything. That's where Robert Zimmerman grew up, the son of a family that ran an electronics and furniture store, part of a tight-knit Jewish community. It was so cold, he would later say, you couldn't be bad. But inside that house, something sparked. His father bought a guitar and a big mahogany radio with a turntable. One day, Robert lifted the lid and found a country record, Drifting Too Far from the Shore. When it played, he felt transported. The sound made me feel like I was somebody else, he'd say, like I wasn't even born to the right parents. That's how it begins for some people, not with a plan, but with a feeling. He taught himself guitar and piano, stayed up late at night because radio signals traveled farther after dark. He caught broadcasts from Arkansas and Louisiana, country and blues no one in Minnesota was playing. Muddy Waters, Johnny Ray, artists who sounded like they were crying when they sang. As a teenager, he formed a band called the Golden Chords. They covered Elvis and Little Richard, and in his high school yearbook, beneath his picture it read, Robert Zimmerman, to join Little Richard. The day after graduation, he left for Minneapolis. I'd gone as far as I could in my particular environment, he said. He called himself a musical expeditionary. At the University of Minnesota, he barely attended class. Instead, he haunted dinky-town coffee houses like the 10 o'clock Scour. But the real shift came when he discovered folk music. Folk felt different, deeper, songs about rebellion, injustice, tragic love. Music that had evolved over generations. He traded his electric guitar for an acoustic and immersed himself completely. He didn't have money to buy records, so he stood in listening booths at record stores for hours. He borrowed albums from friends. He studied everything. I had no goal, he said, except learning all the songs I could. He mimicked accents, finger-picking styles, Irish lilts, Odetta's guitar rhythms. Tony Glover later said Robert was hungry, not just for money or fame, but for experience. And then came Woody Guthrie. Guthrie's songs about working-class struggle changed him. He devoured Guthrie's autobiography, Bound for Glory, like a hurricane, but listening wasn't enough. In January 1961, with a suitcase, a guitar, and $10 in his pocket, he hitchhiked 1,200 miles to New York City, to Greenwich Village, the epicenter of folk music. When he arrived, he went straight to Café Wa. He absorbed everything. The village was alive with poets, painters, jazz musicians, Allen Ginsberg, energy everywhere. Kerouac, counterculture. Soon he found Guthrie, not in the village, but in a New Jersey hospital suffering from Huntington's disease. Robert visited him anyway, played for him, built a friendship. In those early months, Robert was often described as a mimic. He sounded like Woody, dressed like Woody, wore the harmonica neck brace like Woody. But there was something else there, determination, will. His first break came in April 1961 at Gerde's Folk City, opening for John Lee Hooker. A New York Times critic called him a bright new face. Record labels rejected him repeatedly. We don't record freaks, one reportedly said. But John Hammond at Columbia Record read the Times review and took a chance. His first album, recorded over 3 afternoons in 1961, was mostly covers. It sold fewer than 5,000 copies. Dylan, because by then Robert Zimmerman had officially renamed himself Bob Dylan, was dissatisfied. I'd recorded the wrong songs, he said. So he got to work. He wrote constantly on subways and cafes. Mid-conversations, he would stop and write. He became more political, influenced by civil rights, by war, by his relationship with activist Susie Rotolo. This time, he was intentional. 11 of his 13 songs on his second album were originals. The freewheelin' Bob Dylan opened with Blowin' in the Wind. How many roads must a man walk down? It became an anthem. The album shot to #1 in the UK. Dylan performed at the last March on Washington in 1963. Johnny Cash asked permission to cover his songs. The rest, as they say, is history. 125 million albums, Grammys, an Oscar, a Nobel Prize in literature. But if you zoom out, the story is simple. A kid with a guitar, relentless study, total immersion, a bold leap toward mentors and epicenters, and the willingness to reinvent himself. There's a quote on the wall of the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa. Life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself and creating things. Robert Zimmerman didn't find Bob Dylan. He built him. Principle 3. Develop mentors in your field. Now let's talk about rocket fuel. Mentorship. Before Warren Buffett was Warren Buffett, he was a 17-year-old kid who stumbled upon Benjamin Graham's The Intelligent Investor book in 1949. That book changed his life. He didn't just read it. He applied to Columbia University to study under Graham. He sat in the front row. When the class ended, he offered to work for Graham for free. Years later, Graham invited him to New York and hired him. Not for free, though. Buffett learned not just value investing, but patience, integrity, and discipline. He named his son Howard Graham Buffett in honor of Graham. That's mentorship at the highest level. 3 out of 4 executives say mentoring played a key role in their success. Danny Meyer credits mentors across his 40-year restaurant career. Mark Zuckerberg walked with Steve Jobs to talk about mission and management. Spielberg's career launched because Sidney Sheinberg took a chance on him. And Spielberg later paid it forward to Zemeckis, Columbus, and Abrams. Mentors do 3 powerful things. First, they compress time. Why relearn lessons somebody else already paid for in pain? Second, they expand networks. A recommendation from the right person makes you a candidate of 1. Third, they build confidence. Oprah Winfrey credits Maya Angelou as the guiding force who validated her early experiences and steadied her through storms. Now, there are 2 types of mentors. There are aspirational mentors, people you study from afar. Danny Meyer studied culinary icons. Buffett studied Graham before meeting him. You can read their books, watch their interviews, and follow them online. Learn how they think. And then there are local mentors, the ones you meet for coffee. Start with people already in your orbit, a senior colleague, a professor, a coach. Reach out thoughtfully, not with, will you mentor me, but with specificity. I'm pivoting into marketing. Your posts on storytelling resonated with me. Could I take 30 minutes to ask a few focused questions? But be prepared. Do your homework, ask thoughtful questions, and listen more than you speak. Add value. Maybe you understand TikTok better than they do. Maybe you see industry trends on Reddit they've missed. Take initiative but respect boundaries. Drive the relationship. Send updates. Share progress. Act on advice and report back. That's very important. If they give you advice, follow it. Thank them. And don't fear the ask. A no costs you nothing, but a yes can alter your trajectory. The best mentors respond to ambition. They respond to curiosity backed by effort. Bob Dylan didn't wait for Woody Guthrie to find him. He hitchhiked 1,200 miles. Sometimes mentorship isn't formal. Sometimes it's sitting in the back of a cafe, studying the masters, absorbing everything, and then walking across the room to introduce yourself. That's how careers accelerate. That's how craft deepens. And sometimes that's how Robert Zimmerman becomes Bob Dylan. Profile 4. The group text that changed the game. Let me tell you about Chris. He didn't grow up in a typical household. He grew up on a ranch in Taos, New Mexico, in a children's home his parents started in the early 70s. 85 kids lived there, boards of the state, abandoned children, split into 3 houses by age. They shared bunk beds, chores, heartbreak, and hope. Early on, Chris learned something powerful. Teamwork wasn't optional, it was survival. The kids were poor and often treated like outsiders at school. But Chris discovered something around age 10. On a field or court, none of that mattered. Sports leveled the playing field. I went from not being popular to having a prom date, he told me. That's the effect of sport. Sports became his path to belonging. He earned a track scholarship to Oregon State, only to have the program canceled. He transferred to UC Santa Barbara, studied sociology, and wrestled with what to do next. His father had one rule: whatever you choose, it must serve society. Then came a phone call that changed everything. An old family friend, Dr. Richard Donati, once a resident at the ranch, now a surgeon, offered to help. Chris told him he believed in the power of sports to transform lives. Donati arranged an entry-level job in the Washington State Athletic Department. Chris started at the bottom, chalking fields, painting fences, laundry, moving furniture. He embraced every task. That humility gave him access. He learned everything: maintenance, logistics, fundraising. Coaches and administrators noticed. When he applied for a development job at Cal Poly, his athletic director made a call on his behalf. Chris took an $18,000 job with $60,000 in debt. You can't choose where you came from, he says, but you can choose your outcome. At Cal Poly, he drove across California knocking on doors. Every donor mattered. He grew fundraising from $40,000 a year to over $1 million annually. And then, at a conference in Las Vegas in the mid-90s, something small but seismic happened. He met Greg Byrne. They bonded over free beer and appetizers, and later that night went to a Riddick Bowe fight. At the time, Chris thought Greg was just a fun guy to grab a drink with. Greg had grown up around college athletics. His father was an athletic director at Oregon. Greg had tried business school, failed accounting, and then pivoted to hotel management before landing in fundraising. He believed deeply that college sports could bring people together. The two stayed in touch. When Chris returned to Washington State, he literally copied one of Greg's fundraising brochures, literally, colors, wording, everything. There was no reason to compete. Washington State and Oregon State weren't fighting for the same donors. They realized something critical. Collaboration beats competition. When someone believes in you, even when you don't believe in yourself, Chris says, that's when breakthroughs happen. Over time, they added others: Scott, Ross, John, Bubba, Whit. Young administrators scattered across the country, mostly in fundraising roles. They started the group text. They called it NextGen. They swapped ideas, shared dilemmas, compared notes on hiring coaches and raising money. It wasn't strategic networking, it was camaraderie. Hey, that's a good dude, Chris told me. We're all in the same boat. Then something remarkable happened. They started getting promoted. Chris became the athletic director at Rice in 2006. Greg became athletic director at Mississippi State in 2008. Scott replaced Greg. Ross, John, Whit, one by one, they rose into powerful positions across the country. Chris eventually became AD at TCU and then at Texas. Greg took over at Alabama. Ross moved through Ole Miss, Texas, A&M, Ohio State. Scott went to Florida. The group text evolved from NextGen to young ADs, eventually jokingly to middle-aged ADs. But the core style stayed the same. They formalized meetings, dinners at tournaments, outside speakers. 2014, a trial attorney warned them about looming lawsuits around paying student athletes. They discussed playoff expansion before it happened. They debated strength of schedule and television revenue. Those conversations helped shape the conference realignment and the future of college football. A group that started over appetizers became one of the most influential informal networks in American sports. And then came a defining moment. In 2020, Chris needed to hire a new football coach at Texas. He wanted Steve Sarkisian, a brilliant offensive mind, but with a complicated past involving alcohol and a previous failed tenure at USC. Chris called Greg. Greg knew Sarkisian well. He also knew Sark might eventually succeed Nick Saban at Alabama. Texas and Alabama would soon be playing each other. Greg could have hedged, but he didn't. Chris and I were able to talk openly, Greg said. If you have an assistant who can be head coach at Texas, you support them. Texas hired Sark in 2021. Within 3 years, the Longhorns were back in the playoff picture. 30 years later, the group still texts. Their wives are friends, their protégés are becoming ADs. It's now a multi-generational network. It's safe to say we are the old ADs now, Chris jokes. What began as a friendship became leverage. What began as shared curiosity became structural influence. That's the power of peers. Principle 4. Embrace your peers. We talk a lot about mentors. We don't talk enough about peers. Let me introduce you to Jimmy. At 11, he uploaded his first YouTube video, a hack for a niche online game called Battle Pirates. It got 20,000 views. He was hooked. This was early YouTube. Professional YouTuber wasn't a career path yet. In rural North Carolina, Jimmy felt alone in his obsession. He studied everything: pacing, thumbnails, frame rates, virality. He made almost no money for years. He set a goal: make YouTube his full-time job by graduation, but he missed it. His mom gave him an ultimatum: community college or move out. He enrolled, but instead of attending class, he edited videos in his car, 15 hours a day, straight zeros in school. Then, one month, he made $20,000. He showed his mom, moved out, and soon after found other small YouTubers who were just as obsessed. 2 were college dropouts, 1 had quit a job. They started daily masterminds on Skype calls that sometimes ran from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. for nearly 1,000 straight days. They dissected thumbnails, studied million-view videos, analyzed brightness correlations, counted camera cuts. They were competitors, but they didn't act like it. Jimmy was bad at clickbait titles, but great at storytelling. His peers were brilliant at thumbnails, but weak at content. So it was like a match made in heaven, he said. When they started, each had 10,000 to 20,000 subscribers. Within a month of each other, they all crossed 1 million. It shows it wasn't luck, Jimmy said. Today, Jimmy Donaldson is Mr. Beast. With over 400 million subscribers, billion-view videos, a $250 million chocolate company, and a $100 million Amazon deal. He told me his biggest growth wasn't the 7 years grinding alone, it was the years learning with peers. Peers are not mentors. They walk in. They let you ask naive questions, and they challenge you without hierarchy. Many people hesitate to open up to peers. They see them as competitors. That's a mistake. Here's what active peers give you: shared learning, an expanded network, job leads before they go public, honest feedback without filters, confidence through shared struggle, and support on bad days. When your boss yells at you, a peer says, "I've been there." They're not grading you, they're beside you. This may be the most powerful growth tool in the entire book. It's counterintuitive, it feels risky, but it's a secret weapon. Think of Bob Dylan transforming in Greenwich Village, once surrounded by fellow folk students. Think of Chris Del Conte's AD group text. Peers are mirrors, pushers, collaborators. And here's the math. Malcolm Gladwell popularized the 10,000-hour rule: mastery takes reps. Mr. Beast reframed it. If 5 people each put in 10,000 hours and share everything, that's 50,000 hours of collective insight. That's acceleration. Metcalfe's law tells us network value grows exponentially with connections. Expand your tribe, and your influence compounds. Start small: a biweekly coffee, a Slack group, a Discord channel, conference dinner. Root for your peers, celebrate their wins, share best practices without hoarding. If their success makes you grumpy, that's your problem. The journey to greatness is hard, and it becomes easier and far more fulfilling when you stop walking alone. Peers aren't threats, they're multipliers. And sometimes, as Chris and Jimmy prove, they're the difference between incremental progress and industry-changing impact. So that's the end of part 1 of Running Down a Dream: How to Thrive in a Career You Actually Love by Bill Gurley. Remember that our website is www.innoguide.net, where we have many resources for innovators, those who want to get timeline slip under control in the medical product development process, those who want to use AI in the development process, those who want to learn how to use automations to help with that process, and those who want to build medical products that will support embedded AI now or in the future. Just know you'll be learning it from someone who's worked in the medtech field for 30 years and has led teams who developed and delivered 66 medical products. I want to thank Steve McIntyre for producing this, and I want to thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you for part 2. That's a wrap.